thanks so much for joining us this morning. You know, I wanted to dive in right out of the gate on the politics of all of this because recent polling does show about half of U.S. adults believe the president currently has too much power in the way the government operates. So when you consider the political ramifications here, the way this was posted in the midterms, how much of an issue do you see this being now at the ballot box in the months ahead?
I think it could be a major issue for the Trump administration when folks go to the ballot box in 2026, but not because he's weaponized the Justice Department or the levers of power against his political opponents, but because it might actually suppress turnout amongst Trump's own base and affect those Republicans trying to make sure that the president still holds either the House of Representatives or the Senate. Because as Trump said in his Truth Social, it's a lot of all talk, no action, part 2. This is why, in major part, why Trump was elected. Let's separate what lawfare is for a second here. It's changing the rules to weaponize government in a manner that goes after your political opponents. We saw that in New York with Letitia James and Alvin Bragg. When we're talking about figures like Letitia James and Alvin Bragg and James Comey and Adam Schiff, I mean, Adam Schiff was very clearly lying with knowledge of what would the actual nature of the Russiagate investigation entailed about what the president knew or did not know about his administration's contacts with Russia. And so therefore, we need to get to the bottom of what Schiff was doing. Was he talking to the media? Who was he coordinating with, etc.? And Trump said it himself, if they're not guilty, that's fine. But we have to at least try to get to the bottom of these things. And that's been a major hole in this Trump administration, especially if we look at issues like the Epstein files. People don't think on the right that there's been enough investigations into malpractice during the Biden administration, regardless of the figure who committed it.
Yeah, it is really interesting when you look at these polls, this polling. A lot of the respondents say they agree with the president's sentiment. It's just his tactics they take issue with. You know, also, if and when these charges are brought about, do you believe the strategy ahead of time will taint these cases in any major way?
That's an interesting question because it's very possible, depending on the mechanism by which these individuals are judged, that it could taint the well and it could make things ultimately more difficult. But we've always tried to separate these political issues from these justice issues, especially when we're dealing with the top politicians and political leaders in the land. And that's just not a distinction that would have been made way earlier on in the history of this country, you know, potentially dating back to the 1940s during the FDR administration is really when that begins to change. There is always a political nature to justice. And I think the American people understand that intrinsically. But I think the American people are also concerned that if the Trump administration goes too far, then they could worry about that further weaponization, a further retrenchment in the different political sides, and let's say a Democratic politician gets power in 2028, could go farther to crack down on conservatives, to crack down on Trump. And that really depends on where you set up your guardrails, right? If you're not throwing out the rule book to go get your political opponents, then you're probably going to keep most conservatives on side, most conservatives who do believe that the executive has too much power. But there has to be some just wielding of power in the face of hypothetical injustices in the future for this country to even work in the first place. And I think that's what something that President Trump instinctually understands, his base instinctually understands, and the people around him understand. They're not going to cower in the face of what if Democrats use this power in the future. No, it depends on how that power is used, and if they can manage to use it justly.
Well, very important context as we watch this all unfold in the days ahead. Bradley Devlin, great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.